Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thanks God. Let's we pray to Allah Subhanahu wa taala that today we can meet again in the good condition. We are good in health. I can conducting the subject of Indonesian history in the time of New Order and Reform. Starting our lecture today, let's reciting together Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, ladies and gentlemen, my student, today we are going to listen the student presentation. There's 5 students who will present the PowerPointers based on their topic council, namely Yasmin Maitza, and then M. Rafiatul Fail, and then Devi L. Puspita, and then Diba Kiaini, and lastly, Alika Agustin. Each student should present the PowerPoint. Hello, Teresa, silent please. Each student should be present the PowerPointers just 5 minutes maximum, okay? And let me start with the first presenter, Yasmin Maitza. Yasmin, your time is 5 minutes. Please.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Apakah suara saya terdengar?
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Sebelumnya perkenalkan, nama saya Yasmin Maitza dengan NIM 2006521. Nah, pada kesempatan kali ini saya akan mempresentasikan topik yang saya angkat, yaitu mengenai Petrus, politik keamanan pada masa Orde Baru tahun 1982 sampai 1985. Indonesia pada masa Orde Baru ini mengakui ya bahwa demokrasi adalah salah satu sistem pemerintahan, namun pada pelaksanaannya tidak, tapi malah otoriter. Nah, politik pemerintahan pada masa Orde Baru sangat kental dengan militer. Nah, pada masa kepemimpinan Soeharto banyak sekali peristiwa yang merenggut hak asasi manusia, salah satunya yaitu Petrus. Nah, Petrus atau penembak misterius adalah salah satu peristiwa kelam yang berlangsung pada era Orde Baru, tepatnya pada tahun 1982 sampai 1985, yang bertujuan untuk menangani berbagai kasus kejahatan yang banyak terjadi pada masa Orde Baru. Nah, pada tanggal 6 April 1985, Komandan Distrik Militer 0734 Yogyakarta, yaitu Letkol M. Hasbi, memberikan himbauan terhadap pengusaha dan masyarakat agar tidak lagi memberikan setoran kepada pemeras, yaitu preman gali atau yang disebut gali ya, gerakan anak liar. Dengan tidak adanya identitas di tubuh korban dengan kedua tangan yang terikat di belakang. Nah, dan tentunya mayat ini ditembak dengan 3 peluru yang ada di belakang kepala atau mati karena dicekik. Selain itu, biasanya di atas tubuh korban diletakkan uang 10.000 untuk biaya pemakaman. Nah, jumlah korban dari peristiwa Petrus ini mencapai 10.000 orang. Nah, pada masa Orde Baru itu, karena maraknya berita tentang Petrus, masyarakat menjadi takut ya, suasana menjadi lebih mencekam gitu. Nah, Soeharto pada saat itu berdalih bahwa yang dilakukan oleh pemerintah adalah bentuk dari perlindungan negara terhadap rakyatnya, yang menganggap bahwa Gali sebagai perusuh, pembunuh, dan pemberontak yang membuat masyarakat resah. Nah, budaya militer yang berkembang menyebabkan penyelesaian masalah selalu dengan kekerasan. Bukan disengaja, tetapi kecenderungan militer menempuh solusi melalui kekerasan merupakan langkah yang dianggap mampu menuntaskan seluruh permasalahan sampai pada akarnya, sampai biangnya. Ya. Nah, sejak tahun 2008, Komnas HAM telah melakukan berbagai upaya untuk menelusuri gitu ya, menyusuri deretan pelanggaran HAM berat pada masa Orde Baru, salah satunya yaitu peristiwa Petrus. Namun sampai saat ini kasus Petrus juga belum menemukan titik terang, masih belum diketahui ya dalang utamanya siapa yang membuat Petrus ini sangat meresahkan pada masa Orde Baru. Mungkin cukup sekian presentasi dari saya, kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much, Yasmin Meitze. The next presenter is M. Rafiatul Fail. Similar, you time also 5 minutes, please.
Ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya Muhammad Rafiatul Fail dengan NIM 2001708 akan membawakan presentasi yang berjudul Sikap Oposisi Petisi 50 sebagai Antitesa Tafsir Pancasila 1977 sampai 1985. Nah, di sini saya membagi ke dalam 3 bahasan. Yang pertama ada distorsi ideologi, yang kedua ada gerakan oposisi, dan yang ketiga adalah petisi 50 sebagai antitesa. Nah, kita ke bahasan yang pertama, distorsi ideologi. Jadi, sikap oposisi ini berawal atau bermula, titik akarnya adalah pemilu 1977 dan Golkar, yang dianggap Golkar ini memiliki basis kekuatan di luar dari kader-kadernya gitu. Jadi ada beberapa kelompok masyarakat yang memang mereka memiliki kewajiban menggenjot suara Golkar dalam pemilu 1977. Nah, inilah yang kemudian menjadikan kritik tajam dari kalangan ABRI, yang mana ketika itu ABRI sangat dominan dalam Golkar. Bahkan ada fraksi tersendiri dalam Golkar itu ketika itu memiliki dua fraksi, yaitu fraksi Golkar yang non-ABRI dan fraksi Golkar dalam ABRI. Nah, ini ditunjukkan ketika Golkar memenangkan pemilu 1977, ABRI berada dalam pemerintahan yang mana ketika itu bukan hanya di wakil-wakil parlemen, tapi juga menduduki jabatan sebagai menteri, jabatan sebagai bupati, jabatan sebagai gubernur, dan lain sebagainya. Lalu kemudian ada eufemisme terhadap kelompok Islam, bahwa Islam ini dituduh sebagai ideologi impor atau ekstrim kanan, yang mana ini sangat dianggap sangat menyakiti hati umat Islam, yang kemudian ini dilanjutkan dengan tercetusnya P4 pada 1978. P4 itu adalah pedoman pengamalan dan penghayatan Pancasila, yang kemudian dianggap sebagai sesuatu indoktrinasi Pancasila, pemaksaan tafsir Pancasila oleh pemerintah, yang kemudian berefek pada walkout-nya fraksi P3 di DPR dalam sidang MPR pada 1978. Nah, kemudian ideologi Pancasila juga digunakan sebagai ancaman terhadap musuh-musuh politik Presiden Soeharto, dan juga untuk sebagai legalitas tindak represif yang dilakukan oleh militer. Nah, lalu pada bahasan yang kedua, gerakan oposisi, di sini gerakan-gerakan ABRI kemudian para perwira-perwira ABRI kemudian membentuk yang namanya Brasildi, atau singkatan dari Brawijaya, Siliwangi, dan Diponegoro, yang kemudian ini menciptakan tercetusnya suatu forum atau FOSCO, Forum Studi dan Komunikasi, yang mana hal ini mengkritik keras pelaksanaan dui fungsi ABRI dan tuduhan atas keterlibatan ABRI dalam pemilu 1977 yang menggenjot suara Golkar. Nah, untuk memperluas gerakan ini, Abdul Haris Nasution sebagai perwira yang disegani ketika itu membentuk Yayasan Lembaga Kesadaran Berkonstitusi, yang kemudian merangkul banyak para pejabat sipil, seperti salah satunya adalah Dr. Andes Muhammad Hatta, mantan Wakil Presiden Republik Indonesia. Nah, yang ketiga ini ada gerakan kelompok Islam, yang mana salah satu tokohnya adalah Muhammad Natsir. Beliau menulis bahwa dalam catatannya Indonesia di Persimpangan Jalan, gerakan kelompok Islam ini menulis bahwa Pancasila tidak bisa dijadikan sebagai asas tunggal, karena yang namanya dalam kepercayaan seorang Muslim, asas tunggal ini bernama iman, yang mana Pancasila ini di luar daripada bukan di luar, tidak mencakup keseluruhan dari paham-paham yang diajarkan oleh syariat Islam. Nah, lalu kemudian gerakan-gerakan ini bertemu dan menciptakan suatu petisi, suatu tuntutan kepada pemerintah, yang mana dikenal dengan kelompok petisi 50 karena yang menandatangani petisi ini adalah 50 orang. Petisi 50 ini hadir sebagai ungkapan keprihatinan dari pidato Presiden 27 Maret dan 16 April 1980 yang berisi yang mana ketika itu Presiden Soeharto terlihat berang gitu ya dengan hadirnya kelompok-kelompok yang menolak Pancasila sebagai asas tunggal. Nah, lalu antitesa ini, kelompok antitesa ini kemudian dimatikan karirnya, ada yang dicekal, ada yang tidak diizinkan untuk mendapat pinjaman bank dan lain sebagainya. Sehingga kemudian seiring berjalannya waktu, ormas-ormas Islam dengan diskusi-diskusi keberlanjutan gitu ya, akhirnya berhasil menerima asas tunggal Pancasila ini, yang mana Muhammadiyah menerima asas tunggal Pancasila ini ketika tahun 1983 dan NU menerima asas tunggal ini pada 1983 dan Muhammadiyah menerima asas tunggal Pancasila ini pada 1985 bersamaan dengan ditekannya undang-undang tentang asas tunggal Pancasila yang diwajibkan kepada kelompok-kelompok kepada seluruh organisasi yang ada di Indonesia. Mungkin sekian dari saya. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much, and Rafia Tufail. The next presenter is Devi Puspita. Devi, similar, your time also 5 minutes, please.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, di sini saya Devi Livia Puspita dengan NIM 2006667 akan mempresentasikan materi yang saya ambil, yaitu mengenai pembentukan Ikatan Cendekiawan Muslim Indonesia ICMI tahun 1990. Nah, ICMI ini berdiri pada 7 Desember 1990 dengan melalui banyak perjalanan panjang dari pembentukannya. ICMI ini dibentuk sebagai tonggak penting dalam hubungan antara Islam dengan negara, yaitu terjadi pertemuan antara cendekiawan Muslim dengan birokrasi yang ada di negara Indonesia. Nah, sejarah pembentukan ICMI ini terdapat sisi kulturalnya, yaitu membawa perjuangan para cendekiawan Muslim, khususnya di Islam, ke tengah dinamika politik sosial. Nah, ICMI ini dicetus oleh 5 mahasiswa teknik Universitas Brawijaya Malang, yaitu Erik Salman, Ali Muzakir, Muhammad Zainuri, Awang Surya, dan Muhammad Iqbal, yang mereka itu bertujuan untuk menghimpun para cendekiawan Muslim di Indonesia untuk membentuk lanskap politik di negara Indonesia ini. Nah, dengan melalui diskusi panjang, mereka mengajak Habibie untuk turut serta dalam ICMI ini. Awalnya Habibie itu menolak karena beliau tidak mempunyai latar belakang di agama Islam yang dalam gitu. Nah, namun karena dibarengi dengan dukungan dan banyak juga suara-suara yang mendukung, akhirnya Habibie pun menjadi ketua umum pertama untuk menghimpun organisasi ini agar lebih dikenal luas gitu. Dengan ini menjadi tonggak awal bagi umat Muslim khususnya untuk ikut membangun kebangkitan dari negara Indonesia ini. Adapun struktur organisasi dari ICMI ini, pada 13 Februari 1991, Habibie sebagai ketua umum mengumumkan bahwa ada 137 orang gabung dalam ICMI ini, yaitu 17 pengurus lengkap, 45 dewan penasehat, 28 dewan pakar, 30 ketua bidang, dan 17 koor wilayah. Nah, ICMI ini juga mempunyai program-program, yaitu pertama menyelenggarakan kerjasama berbagai kalangan, berperan aktif dalam kegiatan pengembangan pendidikan khususnya umat Islam, lalu meningkatkan mutu para anggotanya, dan ada juga menyelenggarakan berbagai kegiatan dalam rangka meningkatkan taraf hidup dan martabat rakyat. Nah, di sini pun ICMI mempunyai peran dalam bidang pendidikannya, yaitu menyatukan dua substansi pendidikan yang bercorak tradisional dan modern melalui penguatan IMTAK, yaitu iman dan takwa, dan IPTEK, karena menurut ICMI umat Islam ini tidak hanya kuat dalam IMTAK-nya, namun juga harus dalam IPTEK-nya juga. Dan ini jelas ICMI ini ingin menciptakan bangsa yang sadar akan agama dan ilmu pengetahuan sebagai bangsa yang modern. Lalu yang kedua, dalam bidang ekonominya, ICMI ini membentuk lembaga yang diharapkan bisa membantu dan memberdayakan masyarakat Muslim Indonesia, yaitu dengan mendirikan Bank Muamalat Indonesia pertama sebagai bank syariah pertama di Indonesia, dan Baitul Mal wal Tamlin sebagai bank yang membangun perekonomian di Indonesia ini. Nah, hingga sekarang ICMI ini masih terus berjalan dengan pergantian berbagai periode dari tahun ke tahun. Sekian presentasi dari saya. Mohon maaf bila ada kesalahan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much, Devia Puspita. The next presenter is Diba Kiaini. Diba, your time also similar, 5 minutes, please.
Ya, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, nama saya Diba Puratula ini dengan NIM 20045. Itu untuk mempresentasikan pembahasan mengenai pembantaian Santa Cruz 12 November 1991. Nah, pembantaian Santa Cruz adalah peristiwa penembakan terhadap kurang lebih 250 pengunjuk rasa pro kemerdekaan Timur Timur. Pembantaian Santa Cruz ini terjadi di Timur Timur pada 12 November 1991 di tengah pendudukan Indonesia di Timur Leste. Nah, peristiwa pembantaian Santa Cruz ini memakan sebanyak 273 korban jiwa. Oleh sebab itu, peristiwa pembantaian Santa Cruz diakui sebagai bagian dari genosida Timur Timur. Nah, selanjutnya pada bulan Oktober 1991 dijadwalkan bahwa akan adanya delegasi dari anggota parlemen Portugal dan 12 wartawan yang akan berkunjung ke Timur Timur. Mendengar kabar tersebut, para mahasiswa yang sudah sangat antusias untuk menyambut kedatangan delegasi ini, para mahasiswa ini berharap dengan datangnya delegasi serta 12 wartawan akan membantu mereka menyuarakan isu-isu perjuangan di Timur Timur. Namun, pemerintah Indonesia membatalkan rencana tersebut. Indonesia keberatan bila kunjungan delegasi disertai para jurnalis, sementara di dalam negeri sendiri jurnalisnya dibungkam. Lalu dari jauh hari sebelumnya, para pemuda Timur Leste sudah mempersiapkan sambutan atas kunjungan delegasi Portugal tersebut. Namun gerakan mereka ternyata diketahui oleh pemerintah Indonesia. Para pemuda Timor Leste yang membuat spanduk penyambutan delegasi Portugal di gereja Motel Dili terus diawasi gerak-geriknya oleh TNI. Nah, hingga pada malam 27 Oktober 1991, sekelompok provokator yang bekerja untuk intelijen Indonesia mengejek para aktivis pro kemerdekaan dan memancing keributan. Para pemuda Timor Leste pun terpancing emosinya dan terjadi perkelahian malam itu juga. Nah, pada pagi harinya, yaitu pada tanggal 28 Oktober 1991, ditemukan jasad aktivis pro kemerdekaan yaitu Sebastio Gomez yang tergeletak di dekat gereja Motel. 2 minggu setelah kematian Sebastio Gomez, pada pagi hari tanggal 12 November 1991, Pastor Alberto Ricardo memimpin misa arwah untuk memperingati kematian Gomez di gereja Motel Dili. Misa tersebut diikuti oleh ribuan umat Katolik Timor Leste. Saat misa selesai, yaitu pada pukul 7.00, sekitar 500 orang keluar dari gereja sambil membentangkan spanduk bergambar pemimpin pro kemerdekaan Timor Leste, yaitu Xanana Gusmao. Nah, para pengunjuk rasa terus berjalan hingga sekitar 4 km menuju pemakaman Santa Cruz, tempat Gomez dimakamkan. Nah, sesampainya di pemakaman, tentara Indonesia sudah bersiaga di sana yang terdiri dari pasukan Kompi A Brimob 5485, Kompi A dan Kompi D Batalion 303, dan Kompi campuran. Selanjutnya dampaknya yaitu yang pertama, insiden pembantaian Santa Cruz yang terjadi pada 12 November 1991 ini telah menewaskan 50 korban sipil Timur yang mana jumlah ini yaitu versi Dewan Kehormatan Militer Indonesia. Selain itu, menurut laporan lain disebutkan bahwa ada ratusan orang luka-luka dan puluhan tewas terkena peluru tentara Indonesia. Setelah dilakukan penyelidikan lebih rinci, ternyata ada 273 orang tewas dari insiden pembantaian tersebut, yang mana jumlah ini merupakan versi pro kemerdekaan Timur Timur. Pada awal tahun 1992, Mabes Angkatan Darat melalui Dewan Kehormatan Militer memecat Panglima
daerah militer 9 Udayana, Maijen, Sintong, Panjaitan. Meskipun sejumlah komandan yang diduga terlibat dalam Santa Cruz sudah dipecat, Jakarta tetap melancarkan operasi militer di Timur Timur. Bahkan setelah pembantaian Santa Cruz terjadi, Departemen Luar Negeri Amerika Serikat mengeluarkan lisensi penjualan 300 jenis peralatan militer ke Indonesia. Nah, beberapa peralatan yang dijual tersebut ialah senapan, mesin dan M16 hingga komponen elektronik dan alat komunikasi hingga suku cadang pesawat tempur. Dari kejadian ini, maka tentara Indonesia yang dipimpin Panglima ABRI Jenderal Tri Sutrisno dituding melakukan pelanggaran HAM. Nah, selain itu pimpinan kemerdekaan Timur yaitu Sanana Bismau juga ditangkap pada 20 November 1990.
Okay, Diba, your time is over. 5 minutes, please.
Dari saya, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam. Well, the next presenter and the last presenter is Alika Agustin. Alika, your time also similar, 5 minutes.
Baik, perkenalkan nama saya Alika Agustin. Di sini saya akan menjelaskan mengenai peristiwa kerusuhan Situbondo 10 Oktober 1946. Pada tanggal 10 Oktober 1946, terjadi sebuah kerusuhan yang tidak mudah dilupakan oleh masyarakat Kabupaten Situbondo. Kerusuhan tersebut berawal ketika massa tidak puas dengan keputusan hakim terhadap terdakwa Saleh yang melakukan penghinaan terhadap agama Islam, di mana Saleh ini mengatakan bahwa yang pertama, tidak mengakui adanya Nabi Muhammad sebagai utusan Allah SWT, yang kedua, bahwa umat tidak perlu lagi menjalankan sholat, dan pertanyaan yang semakin menghebohkan masyarakat adalah ketika Saleh menganggap dirinya sebagai Allah SWT dan menyebarkan ajaran sesat. Nah, adapun hal-hal yang membuat massa mengamuk dan mulai melakukan kerusuhan, yaitu yang pertama, keputusan hakim yang memvonis Saleh hanya dengan 5 tahun penjara, sedangkan massa ingin Saleh dihukum mati ataupun ditambah lagi hukumannya. Yang kedua, adanya provokator yang mengatakan Saleh disembunyikan di salah satu gereja ketika massa mulai melakukan kericuhan, padahal kenyataan tersebut tidak benar sama sekali. Nah, sasaran utama kemarahan masyarakat pada saat itu adalah membakar dan merusak pengadilan negeri Situbondo, gereja-gereja, sekolahan Kristen, dan toko-toko milik orang Tionghoa. Dan ada pun beberapa kejanggalan-kejanggalan dalam peristiwa kerusuhan ini, diantaranya yaitu yang pertama, mengapa massa hanya merusak dan membakar fasilitas umum umat Kristiani dan orang-orang keturunan Tionghoa. Padahal tersangka Saleh ini yang melakukan penghinaan agama Islam, beragama Islam, dan tidak ada sangkut pautnya dengan agama Kristiani ataupun orang-orang Tionghoa. Yang kedua, banyaknya massa yang bukan asli orang Situbondo, melainkan dari kota-kota lain. Dan ditemukan juga truk-truk yang mengangkut massa untuk menyebar ke setiap sudut kota Situbondo. Dan banyak juga dari artikel dan buku-buku yang saya baca, banyak yang mengatakan bahwa peristiwa ini direncanakan karena sebelumnya kehidupan di Situbondo ini baik-baik saja walaupun berdampingan dengan agama yang berbeda. Dan selanjutnya adapun beberapa upaya yang dilakukan dalam menangani konflik Situbondo ini, di antaranya para pimpinan agama Islam dan Kristen yang sangat berpengaruh di Situbondo berupaya melakukan pemulihan dengan berbagai cara, di antaranya melalui pertemuan-pertemuan, sarasehan, dialog, dan diskusi dalam rangka mencari solusi dan langkah-langkah bersama untuk membangun kerjasama dan persaudaraan pasca konflik. Selain itu juga upaya-upaya integrasi juga dilakukan oleh Islam dan Kristen, yakni membuat kesepakatan damai, diteruskan dengan kerjasama sosial kemanusiaan. Dan masuk ke dampak-dampak. Adapun dampak dari kerusuhan ini ada dua, yaitu dampak positif dan dampak negatif. Untuk dampak positifnya, masyarakat Situbondo lebih menghormati kepercayaan masing-masing, serta menghargai kebiasaan dan adat istiadat kelompok lain sampai saat ini. Dan sejarah pun akan mencatat kota santri karena di Situbondo itu mayoritas beragama Islam dan banyak berdiri pesantren-pesantren yang sangat terkenal di sana. Dan sejarah akan mencatat kota santri dan komunitasnya sebagai ajang dan sanksi mata sebuah tragedi yang entah sampai kapan akan menghantui kehidupan kita sebagai bangsa yang majemuk. Dan dampak negatif dari kerusuhan ini, yang pertama ada kerugian non-materi, yaitu berupa trauma, permusuhan, kecurigaan, dan stereotip negatif terhadap kelompok tertentu. dan akan munculnya rasa curiga dan rasa takut baik dari agama Islam kepada Kristen maupun sebaliknya. Dan banyak juga warga Situbondo, terutama yang beragama Kristen, memutuskan untuk pindah ke kota lain karena rasa trauma yang sangat mendalam sampai saat ini. Dan dalam perusahaan ini juga memakan 5 orang korban jiwa dari satu keluarga seorang pendeta di salah satu gereja di Situbondo. Nah, oleh sebab itu pengalaman konflik ini atau kerusuhan ini perlu mendapat perhatian serius dari semua pihak, khususnya umat dan pimpinan agama agar peristiwa ini tidak terulang kembali di Situbondo maupun di tempat-tempat lain. Mungkin sekian dari saya, mohon maaf dan kesalahan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Okay, thank you very much, Alika Agustin. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we already have been listening about the student presentation, and for other students who didn't present the PPT today, please you start to make the brief comment also and sending it to the WhatsApp group. And please your comment is to one of the 5 student presenter, so not all students should be comment. And it is in order in using the time as effectively. Well, I would like to make the brief comment also, firstly in general, as I have mentioned before, that I think it is very important for every student to understand your topic, okay? To understand deeply your problem, your topic, and in order you can understand your topic, you should read the standard book. So reading the standard history book or standard book related to your topic is very, very critical, very, very important in order you understand what really happened in your topic. Okay, so I think generally you not yet understand deeply about your topic because your reference is still not yet fully with the standard history textbook. Okay, let's we comment one by one, including also suggestion and criticize your topic. Okay, firstly, Yasmin Maitza, okay? Your title is Petrus, Politik Keamanan pada Masa Orde Baru. Do you know what is different between Petrus and Petruk, Yasmin? What the meaning of Petrus?
Petrus Bapak penembak misterius.
Okay, you should be elaborate about this. Petrus, not all person now more about what the meaning of Petrus. Maybe there's confused with Petruk. Petruk is the son of figure Semar in Wayang Kulit in Wayang Golek. So, in Wayang Kulit, Petruk, but in Wayang Golek is Dawala. Okay, so different. Okay, Petrus here is penembakan misterius. You should be understand about this event. Okay, so because your analysis, your explanation is about just descriptively, not yet deeply analysis about the Petrus phenomenon. Okay, so let me see about the Petrus phenomenon in 1980s, I think, in the time of Yehuda government, should be related to the commander-in-chief of ABRI in the time, Indonesian military in the time. Who is the commander-in-chief of Indonesian military time? Is the Raja Intel, Benny Murdani, okay? So Benny Murdani, as the commander-in-chief of Indonesian military, and as the king of Intel or spy of Indonesia, I think it is very important so that his policy including also his program, his treatment in makes the Indonesian society with the security approach. Okay, and one of the method is Petrus, penembakan misterius. Okay, so should be analysis and regarding with this figure, I think it is very important. But it is also interesting to note here that when Benny Murdani was retired from his position, and he made the biography written by Julius Burr, he denied about the Petrus as his security approach or as his policy. So according to Benny Murdani, Petrus phenomenon, there's the conflict, there's the rivalry competition between members of gangster, members of criminal. So there's no Indonesian military policy. There are no treatment from the Indonesian military. So Benny Murdani was denying about this Petrus phenomenon when his position as the commander-in-chief in Indonesian military. However, when Suharto also made the autobiography written by Ramadan Kaha and G. Dupayana, Suharto said, yes, Petrus is New Order policy. In order, according to President Suharto, is the shock therapy in politics. In order, the security is good, so that it is the New Order policy. So between these two prominent figures, different in explanation. According to Benny Murdani, Petrus is not the Indonesian military policy. They are the members of gangster, members of criminal Awan Selam who conflict each other. Meanwhile, according to boss of Republic Indonesia, President of Republic Indonesia, it is the New Order policy. So, Yasmin, you will be trust Benny Murdani statement or President Suharto statement? Okay, should be analysis also between two contradiction statement between the Benny Murdani and President Suharto. Okay, and I think if we want to understand about the Indonesian military in relation with the gangster, the criminal group, and so on and so forth, or a criminal underground, we should analyze it based on the historical fact, historical event in Indonesian modern history. Because since Indonesian Revolution in 1945, there's the good relationship between the Indonesian military and the members of gangsters, members of the criminal group. So this is should be analysis, but this relation is based on the in Indonesian language benci tapi rindu. Okay, if the gangster members is needed, the relation is good, but if the gangster members is didn't needed by the Indonesian military, the gangster member is suppressed by the Indonesian military. Okay, so should be analysis like that. And I think your explanation is too black and white perspective. Okay, let's see. I think about the Petrus phenomenon, it is not related with the abuse of harm. Okay, abuse of power, abuse of human rights, because the issue of human rights is in 2008. It is the currently issue post New Order government. Meanwhile, the Petrus phenomenon is 1982, 1985. So we didn't assess, didn't evaluate the historical event based on the standard currently. You understand? Jadi jangan menilai peristiwa sejarah itu dengan standar sekarang. Because human rights is new phenomenon. You said 2008, right? So the issue of human rights in 2008 didn't or cannot evaluate, cannot assess the critical event in 1980s. Okay, so it is different in standard. Because of that, you should analyze this objectively, proportionally, not based on black and white perspective according to human rights in 2008. Okay, so you said the victim is 10,000. I think similar. We evaluate, we assess the human rights abuse, for example, for the clash between the TNI-AD and TKI in 1965. It is not relevant because human rights is the currently issues. Meanwhile, the historical event in that time not familiar with the human rights. Okay, similar. You assess, you evaluate about the, for example, the era of Majapahit with the modern standard currently. It is not fair, not proportionally. Okay, and maybe it is related to your reference. You should read about the, as I have mentioned, the relationship between the Indonesian military and the gangster members. Okay, you should read about the Robert Cribb books. Robert Cribb wrote the book Gangster and Revolutionary in the time of Indonesian Revolution. It is good book, and I think translated in the bahasa Indonesia. You search in the Google, okay? Searching in the Google, I think you will find out about the Robert Cribb book. Relation between the Indonesian military and gangster, preman, and so on and so forth in Indonesian history. Okay, and you also should read about the biography of prominent leaders in the time of New Order government. As I mentioned about the biography General L.B. Murdani, written by Julius Poor, and also biography Presiden Soeharto, written by Ramadan Kaha and G. Dwi Payana, or written by Robert Elson. Okay, comprehensively biography of Presiden Soeharto should be read because it is very important. Including also you mentioned about the Golkar. Okay, so relationship between the criminal gangster group and political party of Golkar. I think you should read about the David Rive, wrote about the Golkar as political party, including also Leo Suryadinata, who has written the Golkar. Of course, Reclep also should be read, and including IDAS. Okay, so please, you should understand about this Petrus phenomenon and should be explaining based on the historical standard book in order you understand. And please don't evaluate, don't assess this phenomenon based on the human rights standard in 2008, because this critical event is 1980s. Okay, do you understand, Yasmin? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Next is Muhammad Rafiatu Fail. Okay. It is also, I think, your topic, your title is ahistoric. Why ahistoric, Rafiatu Fail? Because your period is 1977 to 1985. Meanwhile, the petition of party, I think it is after the Ajas Tunggal policy. So after 1985. particularly after the Tanjung Priok affair. So I think your period is not relevant if you talk about the petition party or party petition movement, because this movement occurred after the Tanjung Priok affairs 1984 or after Ajas Tunggal as the policy of the new order government 1985. Okay, so 1985 is starting for the 5T petition movement, not start with 1977. Okay, and when you mention about the 1977 as the starting point of the 5T petition movement, I think about the general election in Indonesia and Golkar as the winner is not start in 1977, but should be start in 1971, in which the first general election conducted by the new order government. The critical problem is, and it is become the criticized for the general in Indonesian military, is about the statement of General Sudirman in the time of revolution. According to General Sudirman, Indonesian military should be stand in all groups, should be have inclusively in attitude, in thinking, in behavior. In Indonesian language, ABRI harus berdiri di atas semua golongan. Okay, so not supportive one group and other group. Meanwhile, in the early New Order period, particularly in the general election in 1971, Indonesian military supported the Golkar, the functional group. According to many high-ranking general in Indonesian military, it is not fair, because functional group or Golkar is one group. Indonesian military should be stand all group, not just supported Golkar, but should be also neutral or supported all political party. It is the critical problem about the why, and then there's the 50 petition movement from the former general in the Indonesian military. Okay, so it should be understood like that. Okay, your topic, and also about the President Soeharto statement. Okay, particularly after the Ajas Tunggal policy. According to President Soeharto, Pancasila is the implementation of development, as the implementation of economic development. So whoever criticize the development, it is also similar with criticize the Pancasila. So according to former general of Indonesian military, it is wrong. It is not exactly, because if someone criticize about the economic development, not meaning criticize the Pancasila. So if criticize the development, it is because the development, there has many bad impact and maybe wrong strategy, wrong approach, and so on and so forth. So please don't interpret that whoever disagree or not fully agree with the economic development is similar with the disagree with Pancasila. I think it is, according to former Indonesian military general, the wrong perspective, wrong interpretation. Okay, I think you should read about the David Jenkins book. Okay, because according to David Jenkins book, the 50 petition movement, it is like the General Barisan Sakit Hati, okay? What is Sakit Hati? Barisan, maybe unsatisfied brain, okay? Barisan Sakit Hati in Indonesian military who criticized the President Suharto because President Suharto is Indonesian Army. When this former general become the top leaders, Suharto is still young. Because of that, this is like jealous, you know, jealous or maybe, yeah, as senior high-ranking official in Indonesian military, this former general didn't satisfied with the achievement of President Suharto in managing the new order government. Okay, because of that, you should be read about the how President Suharto respond in passing the 50 petition movement. Okay, let's we see about the Suharto autobiography as written by Ramadan KH and G. Payana. Suharto said about the petisi 50 in Javanese language, right? They are rumongso iso, ning ora iso rumongso. Do you understand Muhammad Rafiat Tufail? What does it mean?
Ya, merasa bisa tapi
What the
tidak
meaning?
bisa merasa. Ya, artinya
mereka rumongso iso, ning ora iso rumongso. What
ya,
meaning? Rafiat Tufail.
Mereka merasa pendapatnya benar, tetapi pendapat yang berbeda dengan mereka salah.
Your voice is not clear.
Oh,
okay, it is Javanese statement. Do you understand what the President Suharto statement?
Yes,
in Javanese language? Rumongso iso ning ora iso rumongso.
Ya, merasa bisa, tetapi tidak bisa merasa.
Okay, so rumongso iso, according to President Suharto, they members of petisi 50 yes, we can. So they like, yes, we can, but according to President Suharto, they cannot do something because when they become the top leaders in Indonesian government, maybe in 1950s, 1970s, they didn't do something. They didn't do better. So just according to a new order government official, they just omdo, omong doang, cannot do something when he become the top leaders. Okay, jadi rumongso iso, merasa bisa, ning ora iso rumongso, tapi tidak bisa merasa. Dulu waktu mereka jadi orang penting, nggak melakukan apapun. Sekarang tiba-tiba setelah pada pensiun kok merasa paling bisa. I think it is good response from the President Suharto statement. Okay, please you read about the Suharto autobiography written by Ramadan KH and G. Dwi Payana. Okay, and should be also analysis about the top figures of 50 petition movement. Okay, because this is the combination between the Indonesian military leaders and civilian political leaders. Okay. Maybe you should analyze about the General Abdul Haris Nasution, General Ali Sadikin, General Hugeng, okay, from police, and also from civilian leaders, Muhammad Natsir, A.M. Patwa, who else, okay? I think very important in order you understand about the attitude, behavior, and political knowledge from the 50 petition movement members. Okay, and I have mentioned about the reference. Please you read about the David Jenkins book, Suharto and his general. Okay, I think it is also translated already in the bahasa Indonesia. Suharto dan Barisan Para Jenderal Orde Baru, published by Komunitas Bambu. Okay, so please you read this book in order you can understand about the Barisan Sakit Hati, okay? In the time of new order. And of course, you should also read about the Suharto biography Elson, for example, Robert Elson, who write about the Suharto biography, and should we also read about the Abdul Haris Nasution autobiography, memenuhi panggilan tugas, okay? I think 7 or 8 volumes. So in order we can understand why the General Abdul Haris Nasution also criticized about the New Order government in 1980s and engaged or involved in the 5T petition movement. Okay. Similar, in order you want to understand also about the Golkar political party, please read about the Leo Suryadinata, David Reif. It is about the expert in history of Golkar. You should read also the AM Patwa, because AM Patwa is top civilian leaders, not only what is supported about the Tanjung Priok affairs, and AM Patwa also become the Islamic leaders in 5T petition movement. Okay, you should also read about the Hugeng book, biography book written by Ramadan Kaha. Okay, you maybe know Hugeng is contradict with the Sambo phenomenon now. Okay, because Hugeng is good police, Sambo is not good police. Okay, so should be read about the Hugeng biography, Hugeng biography as the head of police of Republic of Indonesia. Okay, read books. My book also, because there's the many news people giving the news and views related to the 5T petition movement, and finally also IDAS, Indonesia dalam Arus Sejarah. Okay, Muhammad Rafi Tufail, please should be answer that your topic not starting 1977. If you want to analyze about the general election in which the Indonesian military supported the functional group or Golkar, should we start in the first general election in the New Order government, 1971. Okay. Okay, and then next, Devi Livia Puspita. As I have mentioned before, okay, maybe your topic is too short because just 1 year, and because of that, your explanation, your analysis is not deeply. Okay, please, if the topic, if the event in history is just 1 year, you should analyze it like the Sartono Kartodirjo's book. Sartono Kartodirjo, as the senior historian in Indonesia, also studied about the Banten Peasant Report, okay, in 1888, but he analyzed about the background and deeply understand about those phenomena, although the historical event is just 1 year. So in analyzing the IJMI in 1990, also should be analyzes the background, the history of Islamic Ummah in Indonesia since maybe early 20th century, because as we know, IJMI in 1990s is popular political issues, and some historians said it is similar with the phenomenon of Syarikat Islam in early 20th century. Because of that, maybe why IJMI become the popular in political landscape in Indonesia in the time should be comparing with the Syarikat Islam phenomenon in early 20th century. Okay, including also should be analysis why in 1990s, for example, there's the changing of political attitude from the New Order government. It is different with the policy of New Order government in 1970s, 1980s, in which New Order government is anti-Islam. anti-Islam. So anti of Islamic politics of the New Order government policy is very different between 1970s, 1980s, and changing drastically in 1990s, in which the New Order government supported the new Islamic organization, namely ICMI, Ikatan Cendekiawan Muslim se-Indonesia. Okay. Should be analysis. Why they are drastically changing in political landscape from the New Order government to Islam in 1990s. Okay. And of course, you should analyze also about the emerging of middle class, Muslim middle class in 1990s. And you also should be mentioned about the prominent Muslim leaders in 1970s, in which the Islamic Ummah, Islamic society became the moderate Muslim in Indonesia, and then accommodated by the New Order government. The prominent figure is Cak Nur or Nurholis Majid. Have you listened about this figure? Nurholis Majid said, Islamic Ummah in the time of New Order government should have the slogan, what he called as the Islam yes, Islamic political party no. I think it is the popular program. What is slogan? Okay, Islam yes, Islamic political party no. Because of that, in 1990s, because the Islamic political party become the witness, meanwhile there's the Muslim middle class who has the moderate attitude in politics, there's the changing of a New Order government policy toward the Islamic Ummah. Okay, should analysis like that. The moderate Islamic figure like Nurholis Majid, like Ahmad Syafi'i Ma'arif, Amin Rais, Gus Dur, and so on and so forth. It is the representative of Muslim middle class who has the moderate in political attitude. Okay. And okay, in 1990s, there's the critical question, particularly the relationship between the ICMI in one hand as the representative of Islamic organization, as the bureaucracy, as the representative of the New Order government. There's the Islamization of bureaucracy or bureaucraticize of Islam. It is the critical problem. Okay. Of course, according to some observers, some historians, in 1990s, there's the phenomenon how the bureaucracy in New Order government can be Islamized, can be makes the green force, green force, kekuatan hijau. Okay, but in other opinion, there's now bureaucracy in the time of New Order Islamized, but there's the how Islamic politics became moderate and not radical because managed by the bureaucracy. Okay, so I think this critical debate should be also analyzed, because when a New Order government collapsed in 1998, the position and role of ICMI also not significant. Okay, so I think it is should be understand about this phenomenon. And finally, you also should analyze about the top leaders of a figure from ICMI. Okay, of course, the head of ICMI is B. Habibie and others. I think should be analyzed. Why, as the first head of ICMI or chairman of ICMI, it should be B. Habibie. For example, not Nurholis Majid, not Amin Rais, not whoever. Even Gus Dur Awan Selop rejected to join with ICMI. Okay, according to Gus Dur, ICMI is Ikatan Cendekiawan Mualaf Indonesia, because many members of ICMI top leaders, such as Harmoko, such as Wardi Manjonegoro, didn't fully understand of Islam. So Gus Dur ourselves or Abdurrahman Wahid rejected to join with ICMI. Okay, so should be analysis about the political dynamic in ICMI oneself. Okay, and okay, you use the three sources, but it is not yet enough. Okay, should understand about the standard book related to the ICMI. I think Hefner is anthropologist from USA. Who expert about the ICMI, okay, or Islamic middle class in Indonesia, by focus on ICMI. I think it is very important to read about the Hefner, including also the Fahri Ali and Bahtiar Effendi books, Merambah Jalan Baru Islam, okay, how Islamic politics in the time of New Order, see 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. I think it is very important to know more about the history of Islamic movement in Indonesia in the time of New Order. In order also, we want to understand about the Indonesian military in the time of New Order, we should read about the Harun Qurrah book, Politics in Military in Indonesia, and as I mentioned about David Jenkins, it's very important because according to David Jenkins, Suharto had the inner circle members. Yes, the general in Indonesian military in 1970s, in 1980s, the inner circle members of General Suharto is, David Jenkins said, abangan, a non-Muslim. Meanwhile, in 1990s, there's singing about the inner circle of General Suharto. There's not abangan, but the santri, and there's many general in Indonesian military is a good Muslim. Because of that, the New Order policy toward Islam also changing from anti to accommodative or pro to Islamic Ummah. Okay. Okay, you also should read about the Suharto Bejapi, Bey Habibie Bejapi as the top leader of ICMI, okay, including also Reclef and IDAS. Okay, Devi, do you understand? Okay. Okay, next, Diba Kurotul Aini, okay. Okay, Diba, I think your title is confused in one hand, and also you are too subjectively in analyzing something. Okay, let me read your title. Pembantian Santa Cruz. So Santa Cruznya dibantai ya? It is not yet clear. If Santa Cruz is the woman, oh kasihan ya si Santi dibantai. Please making clear about your topic, okay? And please not subjectively, not black and white perspective, okay? I think as I have mentioned before, if we talk about, for example, about the Madiun, about the G30S 1965, about the PRRI, I think we objectively or proportionally, if mentioned about the Madiun affairs, okay? G30S 1965 affairs. PRRI affairs, DITI affairs, okay? Not pemberontakan, pengkhianatan. I think too subjectively, okay? Please also, what is pembantaian? I think maybe this is not pembantaian, okay? Maybe Santa Cruz affair or masalah Santa Cruz in East Timor, okay? Santa Cruz here, not in Kudus, not in West Java, but in East Timor. Should be clear your title, okay? And in analyzing also you just descriptively chronicle, so I think not yet interesting because not yet deeply analyzed comprehensively. Okay, so if we want to understand about the Santa Cruz phenomenon in 1991, again also your title is just 1 year, is too short, and you will difficult to analyze it deeply. Okay, because of that, please in analysis should be big analysis also the background of the history of East Timor, how to integrate in Indonesian territory. Okay, so I think to understand about the East Timor, we see the history. East Timor did integrate with Indonesian territory since 1975 to 1991. The critical question is whether the majority of East Timor people satisfied with the new order government or not. I think it is very critical. Okay, so whether the East Timor people satisfied with the new order government policy or not. Puas enggak dengan kebijakan pemerintah baru as long as 20 years. If we read about the, for example, Seno Bumira Aji Dharma, a book, there's many East Timor people didn't satisfied with the new order government because the security approach and also policy and so on and so forth, they didn't satisfied by the majority of East Timor. Okay, because of that, the unsatisfied attitude from the East Timor people also should be analyzed. And in 1990s, this is become the critical event because, as we know, in 1990s, the Soviet Union, as the bloc of communists in the world, collapsed. Meanwhile, the new order government said that Pretelin East Timor is a communist ideology. Because of that, this is not relevant. This issue is not relevant because the ideology of communism ourselves in Soviet Union was collapsed. So because of that, when the new order government said that Pretelin is communist, it is not relevant. Okay, so in this context, I think very important about the issue of democracy, issue of the human rights. Okay, because collapse of the ideology of communism. Okay, so in post 1990s, if we read about the history book written by Fukuyama, okay, Fukuyama said there's the end of history because the Soviet Union was collapsed and democracy became the main issue, popular issue in 1990s. Okay. However, if we want to understand also why East Timor finally become the independent, become the freedom, and become the Timor-Leste in 1999 and 2001. It should be related with what really happened in the new order government in 1998. Okay, so Timor or Timor-Leste became the independent because Indonesian new order ourselves was collapsed in 1998. There's the reform movement. There's the changing government from the authoritarian rule, President Suharto, to the democracy administration led by B.J. Habibie. Okay, so I think if in Indonesia there is no reform era, Timor is still part of Indonesian territory because Suharto stepped down and the new order government was collapsed in 1998. B.J. Habibie said Timor problem is like pebble in the shoes. Do you understand, Diba, what the meaning of pebble in the shoes in Indonesian language? What the meaning of East Timor like pebble in the shoes for Indonesian government? What it is according to President B. Habibie. What the meaning? Naonnya Pak Tengartos abdi ge pebble teh naon Pak? Kerikil dalam sepatu. Okay, so according to B. Habibie, I think East Timor is become the pebble in the shoes because of that should be giving the option referendum whether Timor is still wants to integrate with Indonesian territory or want to be independent. Okay, so I think it is the President B. Habibie policy reform era in the time of reform era. Okay, so because of that, the leaders of East Timor until now, such as Sanana Gusmao, Ramos Horta, Mari Al-Katiri, very thankful to President B. Habibie because giving the independent border Timor-Leste. Okay, I think if New Order is still rule still in Indonesia and there is no reform movement, I think Timor is still part of Indonesian Republic. Okay. Okay, should be analysis like that. Okay, Diba, you you use the SNI as the sources. I think you didn't understand. Okay, SNI written in 1984, right? SNI Sejarah Nasional Indonesia ditulis 1984, and you won't understand the historical event in 1991. Okay, it is not relevant. Paham nggak? Ingin memahami peristiwa Santa Cruz tahun 91 kok menggunakan buku SNI yang terbit tahun 84 deh. Ya, tidak. It is ngaco dia, no? SNI published in 1984 before Santa Cruz event. Okay, you didn't understand in using the historical sources. Okay, it is anachronistic. Okay, so should reading about the standard book, you should searching about the history of East Timor. Okay, maybe since 1975 to currently, and also should be reading the biography of political figures, top political figures, whether from Indonesia or Timor-Leste, okay, such as the biography of President Soeharto, biography of Benny Murdani, because Benny Murdani is mastermind of the Timor integrate to Indonesian territory. Okay, it is in the time of Benny Murdani and his gang. Okay, particularly from the intelligence or spy group. And should also read about the B. Habibie biography because B. Habibie giving the referendum for the East Timor. Okay, so because of that, majority of East Timor people until now appreciated fully to President B. Habibie. In Timor they ask the bride, ada jembatan, okay, and the name of bride is Bride of B. Habibie, appreciated to the Indonesian president in the reform era. Okay, and should be also read about the Wiranto biography because Wiranto should be responsible in what is separated the East Timor from Indonesian territory. Okay, biography Sanana Gusmao, Ramos Horta, Mari Al-Katiri. I think it is very important to use in order you can understand about the history of East Timor, including also the Reclap book and IDAS. If you using IDAS, it's relevant because IDAS written in 2010. IDAS ditulis 2010. Jadi untuk memahami Santa Cruz 1991, IDAS boleh dipercaya. Ini membahas tahun 1991 pakai buku SNI 1984. Anda nggak paham sejarah ya. Okay, so it is meaning that you didn't understand about the historical sources. Okay, so I think that's my criticize to your topic. Lastly, is Alika Agustin. Similar, your title is too short, just 1 year. 10 October 1996. You should analyze the background this critical event. Okay, if you just analyze it chronologically, descriptively, you didn't understand fully about this event. Okay, so I think you must understand, as I have mentioned about the ICMI phenomenon. Okay, why the new order government policy was changed drastically in 1990s. Okay, because the new order government in 1990s is pro Islamic Ummah, or accommodate the Islamic Ummah aspiration. And it is interesting about the case, like in the Situ Bondo, in 1990s, there's also the case of Arswendo Atmowiloto, okay, in which Arswendo, as the journalist of Monitor magazine, making the survey. According to Arswendo, Arswendo is Christian man, okay, and he make the survey and publish in Monitor magazine. According the survey of Arswendo, who is the popular figure in Indonesia in 1990s? Arswendo said number 1 is President Soeharto, but Prophet Muhammad is number 4. Alika, do you understand? Hey, Alika, do you understand my? I think okay, please please attention my explanation. Okay, Arswendo Atmowiloto said the figure popular in Indonesia in 1990s is President Soeharto. Meanwhile, Prophet Muhammad SAW is number 4. It is become the Islamic Ummah angry to Arswendo Atmowiloto, and then Arswendo punishment by the new order government. Okay, sending to jail. I think similar with the case of you said about the Saleh. Okay, figure the Saleh in Situ Bondo should be comparing and understanding about this case, because the new order government in 1990s supporting the Islamic Ummah aspiration. Okay, Alika, I think you didn't understand about this phenomenon. Okay, and yeah, you should analyze also the critical figure in the Situ Bondo event. Okay, not only about the Saleh as the central figure in this event, you should analyze also the figure of NU, Nahdlatul Ulama, because the majority of Islamic Ummah in Situ Bondo and in East Jawa generally is the members of NU. Okay, and also maybe the figure from the Christian religion, from China, and so on and so forth. In order you can understand about the Situ Bondo event in 1990s. Okay, in order your explanation, your analysis is a deeply analysis, not just chronologically, like journalists. Okay, in this time there's the event like this. In this time, I think it is not historical studies. It is the what is a chronicle narration. Okay, because of that should be understand deeply about this Situ Bondo event. Okay, however, your reference you use about the Reclap book, it is good. However, should be added, for example, with the biography of the top leaders in the time of the order government, President Soeharto, the top leader of NU, okay, Gus Dur or Abdurrahman Wahid should be also analyzed, because NU members has the political attitude as the moderate Muslim. Because of that, the case in Situbondo, it is not the characteristic of NU members, because the majority of NU members until currently is modern, okay, and also accommodate to the different culture, different religion, and so on and so forth. And as we know also, Gus Dur considered by many religion in Indonesia as the father of democracy, okay, father of tolerance, because political attitude of Gus Dur is inclusive, okay, not as exclusively. You should also using the IDAS, okay, because this is the standard history book for whoever who want to understand about the Indonesian history. Okay, the student presenter, hopefully you understand what I was talking about, okay? I think, yeah, you didn't fully understand about your topic. Please, you must searching about the standard history book, and please you searching in the internet, and searching in the Google, what the standard book, what the standard sources. If we want to know, for example, about the Santa Cruz event, Santa Cruz affair, Situbondo case, and others, okay? I think we are live in the internet era, okay? In the information and communication technology era, should be searching many what we want to know more to the Google, to the internet. If you type something, for example, standard history book related to history of the newspaper in the time of Indonesian Revolution, yes, Google will inform us more related to that standard information. Okay, so I think please do habitually related to searching something to the internet, whether the books, the article in the journal, and so on and so forth. Okay, don't ask to the social media, to the Facebook, to the WhatsApp, to the Instagram. I think it is not a standard history sources. Okay. Okay, I think that's my comment, my suggestion, my criticize to your presentation, and let's ending our lecture today by reciting together also Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. We will meet again in the next week with different topic, and hopefully the student who will present the PPT should be understand your topic, your problem, your critical event, because your topic is based on your choice ourselves. Okay, should be asked and searching to the Google. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.